speechless. However, 12 years ago, when our country needed new leadership, Americans selected a Democrat who gave us 8 years of peace, prosperity, and promise. Tonight I have the pleasure of introducing the last great Democratic president. But first, I want to say a few words about the next great Democratic president, John Kerry. You know, I, like all of you, just heard the moving testimonials about the horrors of September the 11th and the extraordinary witnessing by Reverend Alston concerning his lieutenant, John Kerry. I don't know how any American could hear the Reverend Alston and not know John Kerry is the man we need to be our President and Commander-in-Chief. And yet, we meet at a moment of great peril, but also of great promise for the country we love. Together we can, once again, widen the circle of opportunity for all Americans. We can, once again, transcend our differences and divisions. We can, once again, give our children a safer and more secure future. That is the promise of America, and John Kerry will renew and keep that promise to this generation and generations to come. He knows very well that you have to lead the world, not alienate it. He will lower the deficit, not raise it. He will create good jobs, not lose them. And he will solve a health care crisis for our people, not ignore it. Now, I know a thing or two about health care. And I know that the problems have only gotten worse in the last 4 years. We need to rededicate ourselves to the task of providing health care coverage for the 44 million Americans who don't have it. And we have to do more to lower the costs for all the rest of Americans who are facing increasing health care insurance premiums and drug prices. We also need to lift the ban on stem cell research and find cures that will help millions of Americans. You know, health care is a serious issue, and it requires serious solutions. And that's what John Kerry is good at, and that's what he will give us. He will also give us something else. A great vice president by the name of John Edwards. Now, you know that John Edwards is smart, he's energetic, and he's empathetic. And he understands the challenges that hard-working Americans face in their daily lives. Americans will be proud to have the Kerry Edwards team in the White House, and they will be proud, as we all will be, to have their extraordinary partners, Teresa Heinz Kerry and Elizabeth Edwards, working for our country as well. Now, you know, we've been been through our share of challenges as Americans, you know, from a civil war to a Great Depression to world wars and so much more. But being a senator from New York, I saw firsthand, as all of my friends and colleagues did, the devastation of September the 11th. I visited Ground Zero the day after we were attacked, and I felt like I was standing at the gates of hell. I hope no American ever has to witness a horrible sight like that ever again. And yet, that tragedy both changed and challenged us. I know it did for me. And every day now, as a mother, as a senator, as an American, I worry about whether we are acting as wisely as we can to protect our country and our people. Last week, the bipartisan 9/11 Commission issued its report, and that commission would never have been in existence had it not been for the brave family members who insisted that this government have a commission to look into 9/11. And those commissioners issued a sober call to action that we ignore at our peril. John Kerry understands what's at stake when it comes to our security. We need to fully equip and train our firefighters, our police officers, and our emergency medical technicians. They are our first responders in the event of a terrorist attack, and we need to secure our borders, our rail lines, and our ports, as well as our chemical and nuclear plants. We need to reorganize our federal government to meet the new threats of these times. And we need to make sure that Homeland Security is a priority, and that it is funded properly, and that the resources go to the areas of greatest risk, like New York City. We need to take care of our men and women in uniform who, like John Kerry, risked their lives and for too many lost their lives in service to our country. These brave Americans deserve better. We need to increase our troop strength. We need to raise their pay. We need to provide our veterans, our National Guard and Reserve, with the benefits they are entitled to for the service and duty they perform for our nation. And do you know what we need to meet these challenges? We need a new Commander-in-Chief named John Kerry. Saying for many months now, John Kerry is a serious man for a serious job in a serious time in our country's history. So let's join together, not just those of us in this great hall tonight, but throughout our nation, and do everything we possibly can to convince our fellow Americans to look to the future, to look deep inside themselves. They know what is best for our children. And if we just have the courage to act on our conviction, we will, by an overwhelming majority, send John Kerry and John Edwards to do their duty for us in the White House starting next year. Optimistic about this election because I think I know a great leader when I see one. And so does America. In 1992 and 1996, Americans chose a president who left our country in better shape than when he took office. And he still spends his days working to empower the powerless, to promote racial, religious, and ethnic reconciliation, to inspire young people to citizen service, and to bring life-saving medicines to people living with HIV/AIDS throughout the world. He showed Democrats how to win again, and so will John Kerry. Please welcome the 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Calm down. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to be here with you. To share this podium with my Senator, Hillary Rodham Clinton. And I want to thank the people of New York for giving the best public servant in my family a chance to continue serving the public. Thank you. I'm going to say that again in case you didn't hear it. I'm honored to be here tonight, and I want to thank the people of New York for giving Hillary the chance to continue to serve in public life. I am very proud of her, and we are both very grateful to all of you, especially my good friends from Arkansas, for giving me the chance to serve in the White House for 8 years. I am honored to share this night with President Carter, for whom I worked in 1976 and who has inspired the world with his work for peace, democracy, and human rights. I am honored to share it with Al Gore, my friend and my partner for 8 years, who played such a large role in building the prosperity and peace that we left America in 2000. And Al Gore, as he showed again tonight, demonstrated incredible patriotism and grace under pressure. He is the living embodiment of the principle that every vote counts, and this year we're going to make sure they're all counted in every state in America. My friends, after 3 conventions as a candidate or a president, tonight I come to you as a citizen, returning to the role that I have played for most of my life, as a foot soldier in our fight for the future, as we nominate in Boston a true New England patriot for president. Now this state, who gave us in other times of challenge John Adams and John Kennedy, has given us John Kerry, a good man, a great senator, a visionary leader, and we are all here to do what we can to make him the next President of the United States. My friends, we are constantly being told that America is deeply divided. But all Americans value freedom and faith and family. We all honor the service and sacrifice of our men and women in uniform in Iraq, Afghanistan, and throughout the world. We all want good jobs, good schools, health care, safe streets, a clean environment. We all want our children to grow up in a secure America, leading the world toward a peaceful and prosperous future. Our differences are in how we can best achieve these things in a time of unprecedented change. Therefore, we Democrats will bring to the American people this year a positive campaign, arguing not who's a good or a bad person, but what is the best way to build the safe and prosperous world our children deserve. The 21st century is marked by serious security threats, serious economic challenges, and serious problems, from AIDS to global warming to the continuing turmoil in the Middle East. But it is also full of amazing opportunities to create millions of new jobs in clean energy and biotechnology, to restore our manufacturing base and reap the benefits of the global economy through our diversity and our commitment to decent labor and environmental standards for people all across the world. And to create a world where we can celebrate our religious, our racial, our ethnic, our tribal differences, because our common humanity matters most of all. To build that kind of world, we must make the right choices. And we must have a president who will lead the way. Democrats and Republicans have very different and deeply felt ideas about what choices we should make. They're rooted in fundamentally different views of how we should meet our common challenges at home and how we should play our role in the world. We Democrats want to build a world and an America of shared responsibilities and shared benefits. We want a world with more global cooperation, where we act alone only when we absolutely have to. We think the role of government should be to give people the tools and to create the conditions to make the most of their own lives, and we think everybody should have that chance. On the other hand, the Republicans in Washington believe that America should be run by the right people, their people. In a world in which America acts unilaterally when we can and cooperates when we have to. They believe the role of government is to concentrate wealth and power in the hands of those who embrace their economic, political, and social views, leaving ordinary citizens to fend for themselves on important matters like health care and retirement security. Now, since most Americans aren't that far to the right, our friends have to portray us Democrats as simply unacceptable, lacking in strength and values. In other words, they need a divided America. But we don't. Americans long to be united. After 9/11, we all just wanted to be one nation. Not a single American on September the 12th, 2001 cared who won the next presidential election. All we wanted to do was to be one country, strong in the fight against terror, helping to heal those who were wounded and the families of those who lost their loved ones, reaching out to the rest of the world so we could meet these new challenges and go on with our democratic way of life. The President had an amazing opportunity to bring the country together under his slogan of compassionate conservatism and to unite the world in the struggle against terror. Instead, he and his congressional allies made a very different choice. They chose to use that moment of unity to try to push the country too far to the right and to walk away from our allies, not only in attacking Iraq before the weapons inspectors had finished their work, but in withdrawing American support for the Climate Change Treaty, and for the International Court on War Criminals, and from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, and from the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Now, at a time when we're trying to get other people to give up nuclear and biological and chemical weapons, they are trying to develop 2 new nuclear weapons, which they say we might use first. At home, the President and the Republican Congress have made equally faithful choices, which they also deeply believe in. For the first time, when America was on a war footing in our whole history, they gave 2 huge tax cuts, nearly half of which went to the top 1% of us. Now, I'm in that group for the first time in my life. And you might remember that when I was in office, on occasion, the Republicans were kind of mean to me. But as soon as I got out and made money, I became part of the most important group in the world to them. It was amazing. I never thought I'd be so well cared for by the President and the Republicans in Congress. I almost sent them a thank you note for my tax cuts until I realized that the rest of you were paying the bill for it, and then I thought better of it. Now, look at the choices they made. Choices they believed in. They chose to protect my tax cut at all costs, while withholding promised funding for the Leave No Child Behind Act, leaving 2.1 million children behind. While they chose to protect my tax cut, while cutting 140,000 unemployed workers out of their job training programs, 100,000 working families out of their child care assistance, and worst of all, while cutting 300,000 poor children out of their after-school programs, when we know it keeps them off the streets, out of trouble, in school, learning, going to college, and having a good life. They chose to protect my tax cuts, while dramatically raising the out-of-pocket costs of health care to our veterans, and while weakening or reversing very important environmental measures that Al Gore and I put into place, everything from clean air to the protection of our forests. Now, in this time, everyone in America had to sacrifice except the wealthiest Americans. And most of us, almost all of us, from Republicans to independents and Democrats, we wanted to be asked to do our part too. But all they asked us to do was to expend the energy necessary to open the envelopes containing our tax cuts. Now, if you like these choices and you agree with them, you should vote to return them to the White House and the Congress. If not, take a look at John Kerry, John Edwards, and the Democrats. We've got a different economic policy. In this year's budget, the White House this year wants to cut off all the federal funding for 88,000 uniformed police officers under the COP program we've had for 10 years. Among those 88,000 police are more than 700 members of the New York Police Department who put their lives on the line on 9/11. With gang violence rising, and with all of us looking for terrorists in our midst and hoping they're not too well armed or too dangerous, the President and the Congress are about to allow the 10-year-old ban on deadly assault weapons to lapse. Now, they believe it's the right thing to do. But our policy was to put more police on the street and to take assault weapons off the street. And it gave you 8 years of declining crime and 8 years of declining violence. Their policy is the reverse. They're taking police off the streets while they put assault weapons back on the street. Now, if you agree with that choice, by all means vote to keep them in office. But if you don't, join John Kerry, John Edwards, and the Democrats in making America safer, smarter, and stronger again. On Homeland Security, Democrats tried to double the number of containers at ports and airports checked for weapons of mass destruction. It cost $1 billion. It would have been paid for under our bill by asking the 200,000 millionaires in America to cut their tax cut by $5,000. Almost all 200,000 of us would like to have done that, to spend $5,000 to make all 300 million Americans safer. The measure failed. Why? Because the White House and the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives opposed it. They thought our $5,000 was more important than doubling the container checks at our ports and airports. If you agree with that, by all means re-elect them. If not, John Kerry and John Edwards are your team for the future. These policies have turned a projected $5.8 trillion surplus that we left, enough to pay for the baby boomer retirement, into a projected debt of almost $5 trillion, with over $400 billion in deficit this year and for years to come. Now, how do they pay for that deficit? First, by taking the Social Security surplus that comes in every month and endorsing the checks of working people over to me to pay for the tax cut. But it's not enough. So then they have to go borrow money. Most of it they borrow from the Chinese and the Japanese government. Sure, these countries are competing with us for good jobs, but how can we enforce our trade laws against our bankers? I mean, come on. So, if you believe it is good policy, to pay for my tax cuts with the Social Security checks of working men and women and borrowed money from China and Japan, you should vote for them. If not, John Kerry's your man. We Americans must choose for president. We've got to choose for president between two strong men who both love their country, but who have very different worldviews. Our nominee, John Kerry, who favors shared responsibility, shared opportunity, and more global cooperation. And their president and their party in Congress, who favor concentrated wealth and power, leaving people to fend for themselves, and more unilateral action. I think we're right for two reasons. First of all, America just works better when more people have a chance to live their dreams. And secondly, we live in an interdependent world in which we cannot possibly kill, jail, or occupy all our potential adversaries. So we have to both fight terror and build a world with more partners and fewer terrorists. Now, we tried it their way for 12 years. We tried it their way for 12 years. We tried it our way for 8 years. Then we tried it their way for 4 more. But the only test that matters, whether people were better off when we finished than when we started, our way works better. It produced over 22 million good jobs, rising incomes for the middle class, over 100 times as many people moved from poverty into the middle class, more health care, the largest increase in college aid in 50 years, record home ownership, a cleaner environment, 3 surpluses in a row, a modernized defense force, strong efforts against terror, and a respected America in the world. It worked better. More importantly, we have great new champions in John Kerry and John Edwards. 2 good men with wonderful wives. Teresa, a generous and wise woman who understands the world we're trying to shape. And Elizabeth, a lawyer and mother who understands the lives we're trying to live. Now, let me tell you what I know about John Kerry. I've been seeing all the Republican ads about him. Let me tell you what I know about him. During the Vietnam War, many young men, including the current president, the vice president, and me, could have gone to Vietnam and didn't. John Kerry came from a privileged background. He could have avoided going too, but instead, he said, "Send me." When they sent those swift boats up the river in Vietnam and they told them their job was to draw hostile fire, to wave the American flag and bait the enemy to come out and fight, John Kerry said, "Send me." And then, On my watch, when it was time to heal the wounds of war and normalize relations with Vietnam and to demand an accounting of the POWs and MIAs we lost there, John Kerry said, "Send me." Then, when we needed someone to push the cause of inner-city children struggling to avoid a life of crime, or to bring the benefits of high technology to ordinary Americans, or to clean the environment in a way that created new jobs, or to give small businesses a better chance to make it, John Kerry said, "Send me." So tonight, my friends, I ask you to join me for the next 100 days in telling John Kerry's story and promoting his ideas. Let every person in this hall and like-minded people all across our land say to him what he has always said to America: "Send me." The bravery that men who fought by his side in battle, that bravery they saw in battle, I have seen in politics. When I was president, John Kerry showed courage and conviction on crime, on welfare reform, on balancing the budget, at a time when those priorities were not exactly the way to win a popularity contest in our party. John Kerry took tough positions on tough problems. He knows who he is and where he's going. He has the experience, the character, the ideas, the values to be a great president. And in a time of change, he has two other very important qualities: an insatiable curiosity to understand the world around him, and a willingness to hear other views, even those who disagree with him. Therefore, John Kerry will make choices that reflect both conviction and common sense. He proved that when he picked John Edwards to be his partner. Now, everybody talks about John Edwards' energy and intellect and charisma. You know, I kind of resent him. But the important thing is not what talents he has, but how he has used them. He chose to use his talents to improve the lives of people like him who had to work for everything they've got, and to help people too often left out and left behind. And that's what he'll do as our vice president. Now, their opponents will tell you we should be afraid of John Kerry and John Edwards because they won't stand up to the terrorists. Don't you believe it? Strength and wisdom are not opposing values. They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand, and John Kerry has both. His first priority will be to keep America safe. Remember the scripture, "Be not afraid." John Kerry and John Edwards are good people with good ideas. Ideas to make the economy work again for middle-class Americans, to restore fiscal responsibility, to save Social Security, to make health care more affordable and college more available, to free us from dependence on foreign oil and create new jobs with clean energy and a cleaner environment, to rally the world to our side in the war against terror, and to make a world with more friends and less terror. My friends, at every turning point in our history, we, the people, have chosen unity over division, heeding our founders' call to America's eternal mission to form a more perfect union, to widen the circle of opportunity, deepen the reach of freedom, and strengthen the bonds of our community. It happened every time because we made the right choices. In the early days of the Republic, America was divided and at a crossroads, much as it is today. Deeply divided over whether or not to build a real nation with a national economy and a national legal system. We chose to build a more perfect union. In the Civil War, America was at another crossroads, deeply divided over whether to save the Union and end slavery. We chose a more perfect union. In the 1960s, when I was a young man, we were divided again over civil rights and women's rights. And again, we chose to form a more perfect union. As I said in 1992, I say again tonight, we are all in this together. We have an obligation both to work hard and to help our fellow citizens. An obligation both to fight terror and to build a world with more cooperation and less terror. Now again, it is time to choose. Since we're all in the same boat, we should choose a captain of our ship who is a brave, good man, who knows how to steer a vessel through troubled waters to the calm seas and the clear skies of our more perfect union. That is our mission. So let us join tonight and say to America in a loud, clear voice, send John Kerry. God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Patti LaBelle.
We're going to hear Patti LaBelle here, but let's get some thoughts from our panel. It seemed to me that was a pretty strong speech endorsing John Kerry as the captain of the ship. Be not afraid, Howard Fineman.
Be not afraid. These are stormy waters, but we need a captain. What John Kerry is needed is a metaphor for his life and what he's proposing to do for the country. Steady captain. That's what Bill Clinton did for him tonight.
Captain's courageous here.
And talking about the fact that you can be strong and wise at the same time. They're trying to create the dichotomy that George Bush has not been wise. That is what Bill Clinton was saying. And it's also had that Southern Baptist preacher element of Clinton's speech.
You come from Texas, sir, Mr. Mayor. There was a lot of swinging baptistry in that.
Vintage Bill Clinton. It also says that John Kerry has decided to use that talent throughout this campaign. That's not the only time that you're going to hear Bill Clinton swaying and swaying and doing what he does best.
What's that, Mr. Mayor, was that an audition for late October when he will be sent on a serious mission to South Florida, to Philadelphia, to Ohio and places like that?
They'd better send him on that mission starting the day after the Republican convention.
Really?
They can use him in Missouri. They can use him in Arkansas and Tennessee. A lot of those states that Al Gore didn't win.
Let's go beyond politics to method here. Joe Scarborough. Did you notice how he kept sizing up the proposition? He kept saying, here's one proposition, here's another. I'm pushing this one. A lot of that salesmanship there, a lot of the hands. Do you notice his hands? He's putting forth a deal. Very interesting sort of body language there. Come, I'm going to sell you something, ladies and gentlemen. I'm on the Atlantic City Boardwalk. This will slice and dice. This is Ed McMahon selling. There's a lot of that salesmanship.
You know, and I'm sure all of you would say that I'm a very reasonable man, very down the middle, but as an analysis, somebody analyzing this stuff. But watching Bill Clinton, every time those hands went up and he started talking about tax cuts for every time he did, I just twitched. Because every time he did it in State of the Union addresses, I would be laughing inside going, nobody's really that stupid. They're not going to buy what he's saying. Tax cuts for the rich. He's going to cut Medicare. He's going to throw grandma out in the street. He's still doing the same thing as a multimillionaire. And I'm sitting here tonight saying, nobody's going to buy that. Of course, he's begrudging people that make $300,000, $400,000 paying 35% when you've got somebody worth $500 million running for president who pays 18% taxes. Said nobody will believe that. But you know what? With Bill Clinton, they always do. He talks about welfare reform. He had the courage to support welfare reform at a very unpopular. Sure, it was unpopular. He vetoed it twice. He hated welfare reform the third time he signed it. Of course, the same thing with balanced budget. This is the thing about Bill Clinton that drives Republicans crazy. He takes our ideas, he embraces them, and then he beats us over the head with it. And if John Kerry's smart, he will do the same exact thing on strength and on all these other issues.
Let's go right now. Excuse me, we'll come back in a minute. Let's go right down to Brian Williams. He's down on the floor. He joins us now. Brian Williams.
Reverend David Alston, who this group heard from earlier, better known perhaps as John Kerry's swift boat gunner. Well, Reverend, first of all, your reaction to President Clinton, his use of Scripture, be not afraid.
Well, after fighting the war in Vietnam, we learned not to be afraid. John Kerry was a very brave young man at that time and still is today. And we love him. We're here today because of the decisive decisions that he made in combat. He's a warrior, and we go back to war with him any day.
So that's what you would take away from how you got to know this kid from Massachusetts and how it applies to the job of president.
Brian, I just can't say enough about John. John treated us five guys with the utmost respect. We were young, all of us at that time, very hazardous duty. But he was a loving, caring young man. And he always sought to bring us through the terrible things that we were facing. And I believe today that John Kerry would make the greatest president the United States ever had.
Reverend, thank you very much for being with us. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
And Chris, one last note from our vantage point here at the podium. The speech by Senator Clinton, Hillary Rodham Clinton, was notable for the ad-lib portions where she went off her script, especially about the 9/11 Commission being the handiwork of all those families of the victims. Her biggest applause line here in the hall was something not at all on her pre-approved script that we could all see in the teleprompter in front of her. Chris, back to you.
Thank you, Brian Williams. Let's go now to NBC's Campbell Brown, who's on the floor with Iowa Governor Tom Vilsack. Campbell.
That's right, Chris, and I want to ask you, down here standing near the Ohio delegation, your delegation just next to it, everyone that's listening intently to every word Bill Clinton said, what was your reaction to his speech?
Well, I'll tell you, I think Bill Clinton doesn't often have competition, but tonight he did. Reverend Alston was quite a speaker. Bill Clinton's speech was right on target. He made a very concise case about the Bush administration's failures, but more importantly, he pointed out how John Kerry and John Edwards would make the right choices. This is a campaign ultimately about hope and fear. The Democratic Party is focused on hope. Better paying jobs, better health care, better environment, and a safer and more respected America.
Your wife is speaking here at the convention tomorrow night, and as you know, a newspaper republished a column she had written quite some time ago where she questioned the ability to understand certain dialects around the country, including those of African Americans. What was your reaction to that?
First of all, that's not exactly what Christie wrote. She was basically talking about her own language arts background and some of the concerns that she had about herself. She was making fun of herself, taken out of context. But let me tell you what I feel. You know, politics today is so personal. Politics today ought to be about the problems of ordinary Americans. We ought to be talking about health care and 42 million people that are uninsured. We ought to be talking about 1.8 million jobs lost. We ought to be talking about a cleaner environment. We ought to be talking about how we can become more respected around the world. It is really a sad comment that Republicans have to focus on my wife and columns that she wrote 10 or 15 years ago and can't focus on a positive agenda that they've either put forward the last 4 years or that they propose the next 4 years.
Now, that said, there's been a lot of focus on diversity at this convention, and you also apologized to the Hispanic caucus for the English language law that is in your state. Do you think the perception created by those two issues was part of the reason that you were not chosen as vice president by John Kerry?
John Kerry chose the right man for this job, John Edwards. John Edwards' background fighting for ordinary folks is very consistent with John Kerry's vision for a brighter and better America. He chose a great, articulate spokesperson. I have absolutely no qualms about that selection. I told John Kerry I supported 1,000%. I was just privileged to be discussed or in the same category as a John Edwards and a Richard Gephardt. It's an extraordinary privilege. But I'll tell you, I'm also privileged to be the governor of the great state of Iowa. And we've seen an expansion of access to health care. We've seen improvement in education. We have seen focus on economic development. That's what a real chief executive can do. That's why John Kerry and John Edwards have to be elected, because America needs their leadership.
Iowa Governor Tom Vilsack, thank you for joining us. And Chris, let's go back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Campbell. Let's go back to a couple of people. Let's go to the panel. I want to keep the focus on the question and reason people are watching tonight. Probably most of the people watching tonight have decided for or against this ticket of the Democrats. They won't change their minds, but the ones who do change their minds, was there anything that grabbed anybody on the panel that thinks that they believe will move a mind or a heart tonight, Joe?
I'll tell you, I was just telling you one thing that drove Republicans crazy about Bill Clinton and maybe independents. Another thing, though, was the character issue. A lot of people believed that when push came to shove, Bill Clinton didn't show the greatest of character. You saw Reverend Alston talk about John Kerry. John Kerry, when it counted, when his life was on the line, he turned the boat to shore. A lot of people don't get a chance like that to show what they're really made of. John Kerry turned the boat to shore in Vietnam, toward enemy fire, shot at him to save a crewmate. You know what? Just being really blunt here, as I'm trying to, a lot of people probably don't think Bill Clinton would have done that. Tonight, we're getting a glimpse of John Kerry as the guy that would lay it on the line. Now, I'll tell you what, if somebody does that is in their early 20s, they're going to do that in the White House when it's time to make tough decisions. Not ideological decisions, but the type of decisions you make when the Twin Towers are falling, the type of decisions you make, you know, when presidents are paid the money that they're paid to make those decisions. That's the John Kerry America needs to be introduced to, because I'll guarantee you, watching the Reverend talk about it, that moved me. That made me think, you know what? I would sleep well at night, even though I disagree with this guy probably on 90% of the issues that it have out there. It's a guy that I could trust as president.
That is as close to an endorsement from Scarborough Country.
Well, no, that's deeper. It's actually, it's actually deeper than this man here who stands with us. It's about it's what we call in literary terms a rite of passage. Most of the great men in history, whether it's Churchill, it's Hemingway, it's Teddy Roosevelt, at a time when they were young, showed physical courage. And that was the basis of the rest of their lives. We could look back and say, at one moment, they could do it. We'll talk more about that. Let's go right now to Tom Brokaw and Tim Russert.
All right, thanks very much, Chris Matthews. We were listening earlier to the man, Tom Vilsack, who described himself as the governor of the great state of Iowa. We're joined now by Jon Stewart, who's the governor of the great state of disbelief.
Yes. Nice to see you.
Good to... Thank you very much. But you don't actually need that because
I put it in too late. I wanted to hear.
I'm right here.
I wanted to hear the crazy thing Scarborough was saying. I missed the whole thing.
Actually, he was praising John Kerry for his courage and Reverend Alston's personal tribute to John Kerry and who he was, and he said he would sleep better knowing that John Kerry, someone who showed that kind of courage at an early age, was in the White House, even though he disagreed with 90% of what John Kerry.
That's interesting, because I was always under the impression that Scarborough Country was right next to Crazy Vanial. So I'm excited that they're slowly changing the language spoken in Scarborough Country. That's very exciting. This was a great night. I really enjoyed it. It was the theme was the Kerry Edwards plan for the future, and all they left out were Kerry Edwards and the plan. But other than that, there were a lot of great speakers.
Bill Clinton knows how to give a speech.
Man, that was something. How about that? Wisdom and strength are not mutually exclusive. I thought that was a great line.
Is it a thought for John Kerry to just give his speech to Bill Clinton on Thursday night and say, "Why don't you go give it for me"?
Listen, I think you know, if he doesn't rise to the occasion, he doesn't deserve to be president. But the interesting thing to me is, with all the challenges that face the country today, whether it be terrorism or the economy or that, the real question is, are the Democratic wives loose cannons? I think that's really the thing that we should all be talking about.
Well, we had a chance to talk with Teresa Heinz Kerry earlier tonight, and she said that reporter mischaracterized what she had said. He came back to her and said, "What were you talking about? Un-American activities?" And she said certain un-American traits, which is civil discourse in American politics.
Absolutely, but it is, you know, I think we should focus a lot of time on the wife race, because as you remember, we nearly lost World War II when Eleanor Roosevelt toured the reporter from the Hartford Times-Courant to sit on it. So, you know, these are issues that we really should be talking about. And Teresa Heinz Kerry, for what it's worth, yesterday I saw kill a hobo with her bare hands.
Now, when you're down here on the fort, a lot of people come up and ask your opinion.
You're going to let me go with that? You're going to let me say Teresa Heinz Kerry killed a hobo with her bare hands?
Right, yes.
You've been here for how many hours straight? Nobody should sit like this unless they're raising money for a disease. How long have you been here?
Or getting counseling.
That's true. Russert, he didn't even bring his menu thing with him to write on.
The board.
The board. Where's the board? You're just going to do it on Post-its?
Now, as you know, all these speeches tonight were vetted. Al Gore had to rip up his speech and write a new one.
You're kidding.
In order to modulate his tone. Will you put...
That does not sound like something that would happen at a political convention.
Will you put the unplugged Al Gore original version on your program?
I absolutely won't. That's not the kind of program we
What was
run.
the joke that he had to leave out? Al Gore had to leave out a joke.
Al Gore has told all his friends that the Bush plan on terrorism is like a drunk who lost his keys. And he's looking all over the place, and he said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I lost my keys." He said, "Where'd you lose them?" He said, "Over there." He said, "Then why are you looking here?" He said, "Because that's where the light is." And he said, and that's what the war on terrorism era.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they cut that because it was,
that was
the wrong tone. I just think they went, "Oh, that's not really very funny." I think you should just lose that. How do you think Al Gore will love it the day when he can open a speech without a recount joke? How much is that just an albatross around that man's neck? He's going to be 80 years old. He's going to come up. How about Carter, by the way?
Right.
Who thought 81. He'd be the Velvet Hammer tonight?
Right.
Carter comes out with, he sounded like my grandfather a little bit. He came out swinging.
Our soul is at stake. Jimmy Carter said that.
Yeah. And I'll tell you something. Carter, for all the houses that he builds, and everybody talks about what a great guy and he builds a lot of houses, nobody ever talks about all the houses he knocks down. Because he's out there.
Knocking them down so he can build them up.
Knocking them down. And then acting like he just came upon the scene and building another one.
You know, when you talk about Al Gore and can he ever get to that day when he cannot open the speech, there was a time when Fritz Mondale went to George McGovern after having his own landslide loss and said, "How long does it take to get over it?" And McGovern looked at him and said, "What do you mean get over it?"
It's never going to happen.
It never goes away.
Yeah. No, I imagine that it puts him in a very difficult position, and it takes a certain amount of grace to even come into the arena again and give a speech and do what you have to do. But this was a really very polished. It's almost as if it's being produced by someone who produced the Emmys. It had that kind of...
It might have been Don Mischer who does produce the Emmys.
You're kidding. Why,
And maybe he had chosen you at one point to be the host of the Emmys.
I would have loved to have done it. I couldn't do it. I have a baby. I got to spend time.
What works better for you, Democrats or Republicans?
Neither. The theater, what works best for us is the theater, is sort of the absurdity of the stage managing and the craft. But to be perfectly fair, there's nothing wrong with turning this into one of those Herbalife conventions. I mean, there is a certain feeling towards the end of the night where, as they start to whip up the crowd, you expect the speaker to say, "And how much would you spend for a president like that? $100? Because no, my friends, Kerry is only 50. You know, there's a certain sense of, I've got this tonic here, and it's going to cure your liver spots. And as well it should be, because they're selling to the crowd.
There's no secret about the fact that you brought a lot of young people to your program and to the idea of politics as a subject, and whether they're just looking at it because they can get a laugh out of it. But I also happen to believe that they're more engaged in part because of you and the way that you're dealing with it.
That's very kind of you to say. You know, we don't have any idea. The beauty of what we do is that we're completely isolated. Our studio is over on the west side of Manhattan. We don't have colleagues. We barely go to dinner.
Cheapo studio, by the way.
It's a very El Cheapo studio. You have been over there. You've graced us. You saw that our green room included bite-sized Musketeer bars. But, you know, if they are getting engaged with our program, it's not, I don't think, purely for the humor. It's for what they believe to be the underlying foundation of the show, which is, don't look at the acting, look at the script and see what's the context and what's the content.
Well, they are more engaged, I think, this year than they have been in the past presidential cycle.
Well, I think right now they're worried about being drafted, and I think at any point, and I've always said this, you want to get young people involved in politics. Reintroduce the draft, and man, you'll see voting rates skyrocket.
Jon Stewart, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much. I very much enjoyed it, and thanks for telling me to wear a tie.
Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Tom and Tim. Let me go back to Howard. It seems like we all agree Jon Stewart is great, by the way. It's the safe position to take with this guy. He's quite dangerous if he's after you. Let me ask you. You're laughing, Howard.
But he is great.
I have to tell you, watching him being interviewed by those guys was amusing in and of itself.
What was Gandhi's statement? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you,
right.
Then they attack you,
and then they lionize,
and then you win.
Then
that means Jon Stewart is the future of our whole world here.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Joe, you've been great tonight, and we're talking about something very powerful tonight. The role that a military experience in your life, when you can show courage, when you can have grace under pressure, like Hemingway said, is so much a part of our tradition. Roosevelt had it, Franklin Roosevelt, he had an equivalent with it with dealing with polio. Teddy Roosevelt, San Juan Hill. George Washington won the American Revolution. Jack Kennedy, PT 109. I'm seeing, I know this is an old argument, I'm seeing an attempt tonight to confect, fairly or not, the conditions of 1960, when Richard Nixon was the ultimate Cold Warrior, and John Kennedy beat him at his own game. He said, I'm going to bring down the Cuban Revolution. I'm going to go further than you. I'm going to build more missiles than you. I'm going to beat you at your game. And isn't that what Kerry's trying to do? Say, all right, George W. Bush, you're a great fighter of terrorism. I'll be a better one.
It's PT 109. It's Kimoya Matsu. You know, what Bill Clinton said tonight in trying to validate John Kerry for this audience, for the American audience, was there was a time in Vietnam when I didn't go, George Bush didn't go, Dick Cheney didn't go, this man did. They're making him the warrior.
Wait a minute. Have you seen the cartoon on the internet, Jib Jab, where they have, well, every time that Kerry gets in a bind on that thing, he says, I got 3 Purple Hearts.
But you know what? I still think it's the trump card.
Well, of course. That's the whole reason he was nominated. If you were out in Iowa, as I was last fall and during the winter, when it came right down to it, what was the reason to nominate John Kerry? He's the guy who can win in this war situation.
Mayor Brown, can you imagine Jack Kennedy having beaten Richard Nixon, even though it was a narrow election, in 1960, if he hadn't been a war hero?
Absolutely. I think that
he could have won without that.
He was so superior.
He won by 100,000 votes with being a war hero. You mean he won by...
and let's not even talk about Cook County. Absolutely.
But wait a minute. I don't think the war hero was, in fact, the deciding factor. I think the American people looked at Kennedy, heard Kennedy, and decided they wanted to go in a different direction. Nixon really never inspires confidence. You know that, and Kennedy did. The fact that he could demonstrate he had done something that represented confidence, like PT, was okay, but that was not the...
Let's talk about Richard.
He brought back his shipmates, just like this guy. He had Red Fay with him all the time. There was Ed Guthman walking around the LA Times with his PT 109 tie clip. I mean, everybody had those things.
But let's talk about Richard Nixon.
Other than a rich man's son.
He was one of the boys fighting the war.
Let's turn the tables for a second here. Richard Nixon, not an extraordinarily likable guy, as you said. Nobody would say he was. And yet, in 1960, almost elected president. 1968, 1972, wins in a landslide in 72. People went out and reached for him because they were in troubled times. I think, actually, and of course John Kerry's never going to use the Richard Nixon model, but if people feel they're in tumultuous times, if they feel like things are dangerous, you know what? They may go for the guy that turns the ship towards shore in times of trouble. Maybe John Kerry's not the most likable guy, but just like Richard Nixon in 68, just like Richard Nixon in 72, in times of trouble, they wanted the steady hand at the wheel.
Kerry's theory is really pretty simple. That in 2000, the American people voted for president not knowing we were going to be in the midst of a new global war situation. Right. Now it's 2004. Get a guy with experience in war. That's basically what they're saying. It's not rocket science. That's what they're saying. That's why he was nominated, and that's going to be his
thing. It didn't hurt Bill Clinton when he ran, because there's no war.
There was no war going.
The theme, you heard it tonight. The theme is a serious man for a serious job in a serious time. That's the refrain.
A boring man for an exciting time.
Wait a second.
Well, that too.
That's the spin.
You know, I want to ask you about predictions. You know, we're here punditizing, which I do for a living. I want to say, who would have believed 8 years ago, Mr. Mayor, 8 years ago, when this president, Bill Clinton, was running for re-election, that 8 years later, he would have had his wife elected United States Senator from New York, that he would have been impeached, I mean impeached, and come back as the most popular member of his political party. I have to tell you, times move on quickly in this country.
The public has an interesting way in which they treat those of us who seek and hold public office. They really are forgiving. They really do look to the positive qualities that we present, rather than those negative things that might be character flaws, as Joe would say. They don't stay with you. In this case, Clinton is the ideal example of that transformation.
But for John Kerry...
Mark Antony's speech in Shakespeare and Romeo and in Julius Caesar isn't true. The good that men do does live on. That's what you're saying.
And for John Kerry,
evil is interred in their bones.
It's very important, though, for John Kerry in this campaign to have people talking about the great things he did instead of talking about how horrible George W. Bush is. They've tried that. The Democrats have tried that. People's eyes glaze over. They don't care about the National Guard. They don't care about any of that. They want to know why they need to vote for John Kerry. Tonight, I think they made some progress on that.
Joe, unless it's presented the way in which President Clinton presented it tonight, he literally took Bush on every flaw that Bush has. Each one of them.
Every policy.
Absolutely.
Every policy.
But it wasn't personal.
No, we got Spencer on the floor tonight.
Go after the policy.
It's late at night, but here's Chris Jansen on the floor now with former California Governor Gray Davis. Chris.
Thanks very much, Chris. I'm going to bring the former governor into this discussion, which you couldn't hear. But here's the question a lot of people have. They want to be so positive here, but does John Kerry have to take on George Bush if he's going to show the American people he can be the strong alternative?
I think John Kerry has to show that he will make America strong. And certainly being under fire in Vietnam, rescuing his crew members, and winning medals for bravery shows strength in difficult times. He understands the importance of being strong because of the potential for terrorist attack in the future, and he knows the importance of being respected by our allies so that they'll share intelligence and cooperate with us to make America safe.
But does he have to really go point by point over the differences between him and George Bush?
I think this is more a coming out party for John Kerry to make Americans feel more comfortable, more committed to John Kerry.
Are you surprised, given the dwindling popularity ratings for President Bush, that John Kerry hasn't been stronger, that there are still 11 battleground states where it's a statistical dead heat?
I'm surprised that, given the fact that most Americans don't know as much as they will about John Kerry, that he's doing so well. He's at least ahead, if not at least tied, if not ahead, and no challenger coming out of his convention leading an incumbent president has ever lost. So I think John Kerry will convince America he will keep us strong. He has the courage and the guts and the fortitude to do it. And I know they understand he will work night and day to improve their economic opportunities.
You're a veteran. President Clinton today focused on his service. Send me. In fact, the former president said, I didn't go, but John Kerry did. Is that something that they need to push more, that they need to have resonate with the American people?
For those people old enough to remember the Vietnam War, that was a very contentious war. It divided America. Very few people volunteered. And the fact that John Kerry, coming from privilege, volunteered not once but twice to put himself in harm's way, that says a lot about someone, and I think America needs to know that.
There's tremendous amounts of money, record amounts of money, $1 billion may be spent on this presidential campaign. And some Republicans tell me they think they play their cards right. They're going to make it competitive in California. What do you think about that?
We're going to have a little bet on that. We have to do our homework. No one can take any vote for granted. But if we do our work, John Kerry will carry California, and I think he'll win by 7, 8, 9 points.
One of the things I heard, and this place was rocking tonight for former President Clinton, and I overheard several people saying it's too bad he can't run again. What about your political future, Governor?
I have no plans. I did 30 years. I'm grateful for every moment. The people have asked me to move on, and I'm moving on, enjoying life, and just being an ardent supporter for John Kerry.
Former California Governor Gray Davis, thanks so much for being with us and sticking around. We appreciate it. Chris?
Thanks, Chris Jensen. That would be an interesting race, by the way, Clinton against Bush. When we come back, getting out the youth vote, we're going to talk to Russell Simmons, rap mogul and host of the Hip Hop Summit, going on here, right here in Boston right now. He's out behind me, and we're going to talk to our great audience here. They've been waiting all night here at Faneuil Hall. We're bringing in the people. We're going to the people. You're watching Hardball's live coverage of the Democratic Convention on MSNBC.
Natural gas is one of the world's cleanest fuels, but the largest supplies can be thousands of miles away. The answer is to cool it until it shrinks and turns into a liquid, so it can be shipped. And thanks to new advances in technology, this can now be done on a massive scale. So wherever people need natural gas, we can now deliver it.
It's the big cooking and dishwasher sale at Sears, the only place with the best selection and latest features from all top 6 brands, including Kenmore. Right now, all ovens, ranges, and dishwashers are on sale. Like this Kenmore self-cleaning radiant range for just $399.88. Plus, you get 0% financing for a year and free delivery on all ovens, ranges, and dishwashers over $399. There's only one place to shop for appliances. The big cooking and dishwasher sale. Sears. Good life, great price.
Singular's having a huge back-to-school sale on camera phones. We're all getting Motorola's with Bluetooth technology. The Samsung with Zoom. Wait, I thought we agreed on the LG. It downloads games. The Zoom. You know what, guys? We don't always have to do everything alike.
Celebrate back to school with up to $150 off a super wide selection of the coolest new camera phones available.
We call it our Now You Can Tell Us Apart plan.
Great savings on camera phones. Another reason Singular fits you best.
We have superpowers. We are protectors of the innocent and champions of freedom. We can fly you quickly to safety, react with superhuman reflexes, and shield you within a fortress of steel. Introducing the 210 horsepower all-wheel drive Subaru Forester, the best small SUV ever tested by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety.
My work here's done.
The new Subaru.
If you have $99 in the job, Loman, Woodbridge, and Parsippany will put you behind the wheel today. If you have $99 in the job, the Loman Auto Group has a gigantic new and used car inventory ready for on-the-spot delivery. We don't care if you have the world's worst credit. Call the Loman Auto Credit Approval Hotline 24 hours a day, 1-888-345-CREDIT. Your current vehicle is worth a minimum $4,000 trade guaranteed. If you have $99 and a job, visit the Loman Auto Group on Route 1 Woodbridge and Route 46 Parsippany.
Intense Microsoft.NET training, proven career development strategies, the master's program, a real-world learning experience. SetFocus is the solution for the serious developer. Do you .NET yet? Call 1-866-91-TRAIN or visit setfocus.tv for more information.
I'm Bill Fitzgerald with the headlines. In Utah, developments in the case of the missing pregnant woman, Lori Hacking. Family members say her husband has hired a criminal attorney, even though he's not been charged with anything. Also, 3 days before she was reported missing last Monday, Lori may have discovered her husband's lies about being accepted to medical school in North Carolina. Co-workers say she left work in tears after taking a phone call, apparently from that medical school. In Iraq, a high-ranking Egyptian diplomat kidnapped Friday was released unharmed. Meanwhile, loud blasts were reported a short time ago in central Baghdad. So far, there's been no word on what might have caused them. And the White House says President Bush held a video conference from his Texas ranch with his task force, reviewing the recommendations by the 9/11 Commission. The White House says there could be action on some of the items within days. Now back to Hardball with Chris Matthews at the Democratic National Convention.
To the crowd here in Boston. Joining us right now is Russell Simmons. He's the founder of Def Jam Records. And most importantly, and this is for everybody in the country, not just hip-hop fans, he's the host of the Hip-Hop Summit right here today, the Hip-Hop Network. What are you up to?
Well, the Hip-Hop Summit Action Network has had 24 events all over the country so far. And registering voters, Beyonce hosted her summit along with Master P and Puffy and others in Houston. Will Smith did Philadelphia.
Where he's from, of course.
That's correct. Snoop Dogg did L.A. Nelly is doing St. Louis. Eminem has done Detroit twice. So we're here today. We had 8,000 kids. We had Lloyd Banks, who I don't know if you know is the #1 artist in the country, and we had Wycliffe Jean and others. And we talk about empowerment, and we register voters, hundreds of thousands of voters all over the country. And it's about taking personal responsibility. And young people have really come to this message, and the artists, hip-hop artists, whether it's Eminem or 50 Cent or any of the people who are participating, they come out of poverty. All of them come from struggle, and their message is one of empowerment. And I think that they're all going to vote. It's going to be a dramatic turnout, and they're going to have a lot to do with this next election.
What's the feeling left over among young people? Is there one about how the vote was counted last time, especially in Florida?
Well, you know, we're looking to the future. Of course, you know, a great number of these supporters of hip-hop are African-American, but 80% of them are not. The important thing is that the hip-hop community, when I say they come from struggle, whether it's Eminem or 50 Cent, they are concerned with the war, I think, on poverty and ignorance. That's the war that they really want to fight. And I think that this next election, there'll be a dramatic turnout. They'll have a lot to, there'll be, whoever's in office will be accountable to them. And I'm
Let me ask you my favorite question. So what? The kid gets out and votes. He's 18 years old. He's never voted. Or he's 25. He never voted before. He goes and votes. So what? What's the change?
Well, the fact is that each person, the most American thing you can do is vote as part of a process to empower yourself to feel like you're part of community. You know, and the whole what's the difference? Well, they said it didn't matter last time. I believe maybe we wouldn't have gone to war. All the poor people that they represent, the voices for all the voiceless people. You know, this hip-hop community is a voice that's, you know, it's been locked out, but of course they must know best what America's lacking because they're the ones in struggle. I got the tax break, not them.
Right.
You know, I got a tremendous tax break. And I just think that they're much more creative, compassionate, they have vision, you know, where a lot of the older people, you know, kind of hard-headed and rigid. And so I'm excited about young people taking control.
In a related matter, did you see Fahrenheit 9/11?
I did see it.
What do you think it'll do to voting strength? Will people get out and vote because of that movie or not?
I can't even
$100 million.
I can't even imagine why people would suggest that it doesn't. I had 4 kids in my office, and they were talking about going to see the movie, and like 2 of them weren't really into it, and 1 didn't care, and then 1 said, we gotta go, and they all went. The next day, they were all out there registering other voters. I mean, they were very excited after they saw the movie, and they were inspired. And they say all these people who are not sophisticated see it, and what do they know? Well, there's some of these basic ideas that come out of the movie will scare you to death and send you to the polls, send you to pay attention. You know, people are afraid. I mean, I think we need to be open-minded. Our relationship with the world, you know, we need to have a better relationship with the world. I think they're afraid when they see these kind of things, and they see these kind of not threats so much as when they see these kind of attacks on our current administration, they want to make changes maybe.
Let me ask you a question I think gets to a lot of kids, because a lot of kids think about right now, today. You know, everybody lives for the weekend, Friday night, Saturday night. How do you feel? Because there are a lot of them watching right now. They're up late. It's the summer. How do you feel after you vote?
Well, you feel empowered. I mean, it's like taking part in the process. You know, it's like I said, people wake up in the morning. Some wake up thinking what they can get. It's a disgusting feeling. By the end of the day, you know, because you don't get anything by feeling that way. When you wake up thinking what you can give, the day goes better. You know, you find that's what makes you happy. And voting is part of that process. It's an empowering, you know, thing to do. You know, it makes you feel like when you get, like I always say, it's the kids who come out of struggle. When you get pulled over by the police and you don't have a voter's registration, it's like, oh, he don't know nobody. Now you have a voter's registration. Maybe he does. Maybe he is part of something. Maybe he has people that support him. You know, and that's really what we want. We want to be community. We want to work together. And I think young people need to learn that feeling. And so that's why it's so important that I mean, again, did I tell you that Eminem and Will Smith and Lloyd Banks and Wycliffe Jean and Beyonce and Jay-Z and Puffy. Think about Puffy. He is more well-liked and respected across the world, certainly, by young people than maybe a George Bush is. For that matter, Jay-Z is more well-liked and trusted and respected than probably John Kerry.
Tell me,
they are well-liked and respected, and when they say go vote, kids are going to vote.
Well, you're a legend, one of the legends in American society. Now, let me ask you something from your heights, really. Is hip-hop a lot of anger? What is the message of hip-hop? Is there one?
Well, there's
a lot of emotions
group
involved.
of messages coming out of hip-hop. But, you know, I like to say it's God's soundtrack, you know. Some of what these people say about frustration and anger comes out. Some of that is true, but it's the voice for voiceless people, you know. And a lot of times, those people's voices, you may interpret it as anger, but many people who understand the language interpret it as inspiring or as hope. People coming out of struggle who want to make it. You know, you may think the cursed words are bad, but the cursed ideas I see at 6 o'clock on the news are bad.
I know.
You know.
Why do young kids who haven't had it too tough love it?
because it's got a lot of integrity. It's honest. An honest expression. These are poets who feel, the reason that the rappers are doing what they're doing, no one has turned us down when we ask them for their support, is because the rappers are so connected. They know what the people are asking from them. The people want them to go out and register voters, want them to go out and inspire people. You know, in the 60s, there was a big influence from music and culture that had to do with the direction of this country. That time is coming back. And hip-hop is in the forefront of supporting these efforts to empower our communities.
Let me talk to you about, I want your views, not mine or anybody else's, just yours, Mr. Simmons. Let me ask you, right before the last election in 2002, before the congressional elections, which I guess you want people to vote in too, Hillary Clinton was able to vote on the Senate floor. John Kerry voted. John Edwards voted. The ticket basically voted. And they were asked to give the president basically a blank check to decide whether to go to war or not. They put it in his hands. Was that a vote you're happy about?
No, I think they made a mistake. And I think it's obvious they made a mistake, and the whole world knows. And it's kind of arrogant for us to think that, you know, the whole world is wrong and we're right.
Right.
The fact is that you know what that could do for the war on poverty and ignorance? Instead, we're blowing it on, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars the tab's going to be. Could you imagine what that would do for education? The idea of America having equal high-quality education, what would that mean?
The reason I think that question about how John Kerry voted and John Edwards voted and Hillary Clinton voted, all big speakers against the President of the United States, one of the messages tonight is the President should admit when he makes a mistake. Now, I heard it tonight, and a lot of people, a lot of people buy that. If you make a mistake in public life, you ought to say, I made a mistake. Why don't these Democrats like Edwards and Kerry and Mrs. Clinton, Senator Clinton, say they shouldn't have given a blank check to the President?
Can I say that?
Why don't you ask your own people, your leaders?
Don't say leaders. First of all, my effort to register voters is a nonpartisan effort. I want whoever's in office to respect young people and kids with greater vision than the old people who've already messed things up.
Do you think, as a citizen of the United States, that people who make mistakes in high office should admit
They should be held accountable, absolutely. And I think they should be held accountable for allowing the President to make that terrible mistake on our behalf. They've used fear and anger to fuel their choices, to have people agree with their choice. They've scared the American public into chasing us down this road. Instead of love, which is the most basic and simple idea to govern this country and to give out to the world. They export something that we want back, which is love.
When you vote this year, without telling me who you're voting for unless you want to, what's going to be the picture in your mind of what this election's about?
Well, the election is about a fair chance for all Americans. And it's about, you know, only poor people are at war. There's no congressman's son at war. There's no Bush out on the front line. You know, John Kerry's family's not on the front line either. I'm just making a point that all of us who are in struggle are being used. It's my opinion. And I think that, you know, we have to pick the best available when we go to the polls. We can't say no one represents every idea in my head. We have to say there's some who are closer to the way we think, and we can try to hold them accountable and push them to respect people who are, you know, again, this country should be the most compassionate and giving country in the world. We have all of the resources. We have the greatest country, that all the freedom that we are, some of the freedom that we're losing. That we have to stand up and be as good as those great documents that are written about us.
What do you think the effect of an election of the opposition of Kerry and Edwards this year will do to the morale of the troops who are fighting over there in Afghanistan and fighting in Iraq? Will they feel like they've been let down by their country? What will they feel?
No, those troops, they went to fight for our country. And they would like for our country to be honest with them and give them the best opportunity and protect them when necessary. And if we made a mistake, you know, then to bring them home or to make the best efforts to protect them while they're there. I mean, we just can't run home, most likely. It probably would be a mistake. You know, we've bombed a lot of innocent people. I mean, that's why I tell young people to vote. Think about the fact that these people are out there with your money. I gave away, I think, $10 million in bonuses this year. And it was the beginning of the year I gave it away. And everybody gave up 50% before they could blink. They didn't even get their money. They got half their money. I'm still holding my money till January or till April. And I'm paying capital gains tax. I got this tremendous tax break. These people gave away 50% of their money, and they need to hold the government accountable for where they're spending it. If they're spending it bombing innocent people, then all of our karma is involved. So if we don't vote, then we're giving them a free
I'm going to let this fellow behind me express himself. Who was talking? You?
Yeah, I was talking. I was just thanking Mr. Simmons for his opinion, and just thanking for the Hip Hop Summit because it's very informative. I registered to vote, and I've registered a lot of my friends to vote, and we're just going to continue to go on with the American dream.
What's this say, run against Bush? Are you guys partisan or what?
No, we're not partisan. We just...
It says run against Bush. What are you talking about? Give me a break. I can read the thing.
We bought capitalism. We helped the
right. We're supposed to believe what you're saying. And this sign says run against Bush. Okay, let me ask you, are there any Republicans in the audience here? Come on, buddy, come on. What did you think of that message from Mr. Simmons?
I think he's right. I think that you have to hold people accountable for what they do, and I think people have to take. But I think that Kerry also doesn't hold himself accountable, and he sits there and he says that he did this and he did that, and he flip-flops. And it's true. He votes for 87 million, doesn't vote for 87 million. I mean, at least Bush even if he makes a mistake, he sticks by what he says. He doesn't change his opinion, and he doesn't do anything.
That's pretty good. Let's go over here. Let's get out here. Let's get here. Let's say, what do you think, sir? What do you think of this fellow and his message?
Well, I think basically that I just cannot understand why anyone would consider voting for the current administration. I think basically we've all had a rough time in this country, and I think that basically we need a new administration, a new leadership.
Does it bother you that younger people generally need to be pushed now because they don't regularly vote like us?
Well, I think that this time is going to be different. I think the numbers are going to surprise everyone. I think that young people today are fed up as well, and I think that centrally the Kerry is going to carry the young voters today.
Are you from Holy Cross?
I am, sir.
Okay, I know you went to my college.
My alma mater.
Went to my college. We'll get the picture later. Well, are you 18 to 24? How old are you?
33.
God, I thought you were hot. I thought you were 18. Anybody here 18 to 24? Come on. You want to give a message to this guy here? Get him hooked.
What do you have to say? I have to say that I am proud to vote. I would be really angry with anybody my age who wasn't voting.
How old are you now?
I'm 20 years old.
So you voted once?
This is my first presidential election.
Who are you voting for?
Kerry, all the way.
Kerry, all the way. Anybody voting for Bush? Who's under 24?
Are you voting for Bush? Let me hear why.
No, I'm not voting for Bush.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you voting for Bush?
I want some Bushies up here. Any Bushies? Come here. There's a Bush guy. You're surrounded, but it's a free country, even in downtown Boston. Let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
Do you think his message is right that everybody should vote, or you want to keep it exclusive? How do you want it? You want everybody?
Everybody should be able to vote. Absolutely.
Everybody should. Do you think it's a good message to get your age group out to vote?
I'm 44. We always vote. Hopefully.
Jesus. I thought you were 24. Come here.
I'd like to say one thing. I'd like to give Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan, all the black people out here, to come out and vote. You know what I'm saying? Because it's very important for us black people out here to vote. You know what I'm saying?
You're a voter yourself, sir?
Yes, I am a voter.
Okay, you're a voter?
Yeah, I'm voting for Bush. I'm voting to get him out of office. Yeah, I'm 18 to 24. Get him out.
Okay, more with Russell Simmons, much more with the audience when we come back. It's late at night, but the campaign goes on. You're watching Hardball, live coverage of the Democratic Convention on MSNBC.
Every day I thank God I'm not related to any poor American.
Now, speaking of that, I want to see if you're really in touch with the average American. Let me ask you, what is the average price of a home in the United States?
$7.9 million.
No. Yeah. No.
Back house?
No. Well, never mind. Let me ask you. What did you think of Michael Moore's controversy, that whole controversy over his thing there, his movie? Have you seen Fahrenheit 9/11?
Seen it. I financed it. The greatest film ever made. It was so accurate, truthful, inspiring.
Really? All right. Now, one last question, Senator. Yeah, your convention slogan is "Stronger at home, respected in the world." Why did you go with that "Stronger at home, respected in the world" slogan?
It tested better than Kerry and Edwards, just two straight guys who can't keep their hands off of each other.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Senator. Listen, well, good luck. Good luck this week at the convention. We'll be right back with headlines and Tom Arnold. Say hello to John Melendez, Kevin Eubanks, and the Tonight Show man.
For you, Chris. Oh, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'm not on the ballot. Let me ask you, what's the biggest issue in the campaign? I'll give you three options. The first is Iraq. The war in Iraq is number one. The second issue is jobs and wages. The third issue is cultural values. What's the number one issue? The war. Okay, let me give everybody time. Does that surprise you, Andrea?
Not at all.
Number issue, war. Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
War is the issue.
War.
Okay, Howard Fineman is a student.
After the first night of this convention, that's what the people in the convention hall are saying.
And what was the key line they said about Senator Kerry? What was the best pitch for Kerry tonight?
Wisdom and strength are not opposing values. That's what Bill Clinton said.
And what was the role they set up for Kerry tonight? The role he will play in American life if he wins?
He assumes the responsibility to steer this ship.
The captain of the ship. Is that going to be the message of the week?
Serious man for serious times for a serious job.
Does everybody like the ring of night? Does that work for everybody here? Yeah. A leading officer of the Pennsylvania government, almost governor of Pennsylvania, Robert Kerry last time. And most importantly, a Holy Cross guy here. Let me ask you, is this election going to be close, or is it going to be a landslide in one of the other directions? Why do you think it's going to be close?
It's going to be tough. I mean, Kerry he's doing an excellent job, and but Bush is the incumbent, so he's going to be tough to unseat. But he's messing it up bad enough.
I don't think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a landslide either direction. What do you think?
Who are you going to vote for?
I'll let you know if you see me privately in about 2 months. Anyway, I want to thank everybody tonight. It's great. Willie Brown, the great mayor of San Francisco for so many years, and the Speaker of the House in California, an even bigger job. Howard Fineman, my partner all the time. Andrea Mitchell, the best reporter we got at NBC. Joe Scarborough has taken over our coverage alongside with Ronald Reagan. After Hours is coming up. It's wrapping up. We're going to see you tomorrow night here at the Faneuil Hall. More coming tomorrow night.
Clear the aloof hurdle.
All right, well, thank you for joining us, Laura.
It's good to be here.
Joining us here in Boston is Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, former Lieutenant Governor of Maryland. She's also a visiting fellow at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University and an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. And Kathleen, this is your home state. In essence, it's the Kennedy state. What's it like for you to be here tonight?
It's a great night. Was wonderful to listen to former President Bill Clinton. He laid out the differences between the Democrats and the Republicans and said, what kind of future do we want? And I think that's the question that my family has been asking for 100 years. You know, what can you do? How can you make your country better? What kind of contribution are you going to make? And it was a very exciting evening.
Kathleen, what do you expect out of this week? I mean, looking forward to Thursday night, I mean, how do you energize the Democrats, or are they already energized?
There's clearly a lot of energy. There is no question about that. I think what this week does is it brings us together. It makes sure that we're on the same wavelength, the same talking points. And then Thursday night, we're going to be looking forward to hearing John Kerry lay out his vision clearly for the country. And we're going to remind ourselves that this is a person who has physical courage, went to Vietnam, put himself on the line, has moral courage, has taken tough political stands, wants this country to stand for something abroad as well as at home, and work for working men and women. So, you know, I think we've got the energy. We want to make sure that we've got the music to go out of here with.
Kathleen, former President Clinton can reach out to virtually anybody. Does Senator Kerry have that ability to reach out to even the poorest of poor people?
He does. He certainly does when he's, you know, out on the campaign trail, when he's listened to people who have suffered, whether it's, as we heard tonight, trying to play baseball, trying to get health care, trying to make sure that they get a good education. He's listened. He understands. The challenge, of course, is when you speak to thousands of people all across the country, and I think he will go deep into his soul, deep into his heart, take that which made him go into public service in the first place, and say, this is who I am, but more importantly, this is where I can lead our country to. This is what I can do for you.
Are we going to see you back in public service soon?
I'm working very hard for John Kerry, and I consider that the best public service I can make right now. Thanks, Greta.
All right. Thank you, Kathleen. Up next, we've got another special hour of On the Record live from Boston. We're going to take you back to the floor of the Fleet Center and show you what you missed at night, one of the Democratic National Conventions. Plus, we're taking your phone calls at 1-888-TEL-FOX. For a special edition of On the Record live from the Democratic National Convention. Let's go straight to Fox's chief political correspondent Carl Cameron, who's at the Fleet Center where Democrats just wrapped up. And Carl, you're missing the fireworks at this end of town.
Well, I tell you what, Greta, there was some fireworks here. These Democratic prize left in the modern convention. The nomination is known. The party doesn't have any of its infighting publicly anymore. But there was big news made here today. Not only did the Democratic National Convention actually start promptly on time at 4 o'clock, Bill Clinton, the keynote headlining speaker, ended on time, and they ended the convention this evening at 11 o'clock in timely fashion. That's big news in convention circles. The speeches, very much representative of what John Kerry had been hoping for, an attempt to sort of dial back a lot of the more eye-popping rhetoric, trying to tone things down a little bit to show that the Democratic Party, and specifically John Kerry and John Edwards, have the type of serious maturity necessary to be a commander-in-chief, lead the nation in a time of war, but also have a more common-sense approach to domestic agenda issues than they argue George W. Bush and the Republicans have. The keynote speaker, as we said, Bill Clinton tonight, clearly wrapped this crowd. They loved every moment of it. Even partisan Republicans who over the years have criticized Bill Clinton ruthlessly note he is an electrifying speaker. And today, with all the concern that he might overshadow or steal the limelight for John Kerry, clearly he didn't. He turned it all for John Kerry. Here's a sampling of Bill Clinton.
John Kerry came from a privileged background. He could have avoided going too, but instead, he said, "Send me." When they sent those swift boats up the river in Vietnam and they told them their job was to draw hostile fire, to wave the American flag and bait the enemy to come out and fight, John Kerry said, "Send me." And then, on my watch, when it was time to heal the wounds of war and normalize relations with Vietnam and to demand an accounting of the POWs and MIAs we lost there, John Kerry said, "Send me."
And, of course, as President Clinton was beginning there, he was talking about John Kerry's volunteer service in Vietnam, three-time medal, Purple Heart winner, numerous other medals. And implicit in that statement is the contrast that Democrats want to make to George W. Bush, whose service in the National Guard has been questioned. With the sort of quasi-ban on Bush bashing that the Kerry campaign and the Democrats hope this convention will be, there still was some harsh rhetoric. The Kerry campaign has been carefully vetting all of the speakers, but there were basically three speeches that they knew they couldn't do too much to change: Bill Clinton's, Al Gore's, and Jimmy Carter's. Al Gore tonight did remind Democrats that they should turn their hostility and anger, their resentment from the 2000 recount debacle, into support for John Kerry. But it was Jimmy Carter who used perhaps the most extreme language, criticizing Republicans as extremists and going specifically at George W. Bush. Former President Jimmy Carter.
What a difference these few months of extremism have made. The United States has alienated its allies, dismayed its friends, and inadvertently gratified its enemies by proclaiming a confused and disturbing strategy of preemptive war. With our allies disunited, the world resenting us, and the Middle East ablaze, we need John Kerry to restore life to the global war against terrorism.
The Kerry campaign says they're not being critical, they are being comparative.